On my wedding day, I was about to say my vows when my maid of honor stood up and announced she was pregnant with my husband's baby. 300 guests froze in shock, but instead of breaking down, I just smiled and said, "I've been waiting for you to finally tell everyone the truth." Her face turned pale. She had no clue what I was about to reveal next. My wedding day, the one I'd dreamed of since I was a little girl, transformed into a twisted nightmare in a single, devastating heartbeat. Standing at the altar, radiant in my gown, my best friend since kindergarten looked me dead in the eye and casually announced to 200 stunned guests, "I'm pregnant, Anna, and Colton is the father." The church had been breathtaking, all white roses and golden light, the string quartet playing softly as I walked towards what I thought was my perfect future. My heart, full of pure joy, was pounding. Colton, my fiancé, stood waiting, his dark eyes locked on mine, looking adorably nervous. 3 years we'd been together, and I still made him nervous. The pastor was about to pronounce us husband and wife, and I squeezed Colton's sweaty hand, oblivious to the storm about to break. "Do you, Colton, take Anna to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do," he'd whispered, his voice cracking slightly. Then the pastor turned to me. "Do you, Anna, take Colton to be your lawfully wedded husband? To have and to hold in sickness?" And that's when it happened. Her voice, sharp and jarring, sliced through the sacred silence like a blade. Every head snapped around. Gasps rippled through the congregation. It was Karen Oscar, my maid of honor, the woman I'd known since kindergarten, the woman I'd trusted with every single secret, every dream. She wore the dusty rose bridesmaid dress we'd picked out together, but her face was twisted with something ugly, something I'd never seen before. "I can't let this happen," she declared, her voice carrying to every corner. "Anna, you need to know the truth." My dad half rose from his seat, my mom gripping his arm, knuckles white. A low, confused buzz started in the pews, growing louder. "Karen, what are you doing?" I managed to keep my voice steady, but the joy in my heart had vanished, replaced by a frantic, terrifying beat. She lifted her chin, defiant. "I'm pregnant, Anna, and Colton is the father." The murmurs exploded into shocked exclamations. Someone behind me gasped, "Oh my God." The string quartet faltered and died. Colton went white as paper. "Karen, don't." "Don't what?" she snarled, stepping closer, her voice growing stronger, more vicious. "Don't tell her how you've been coming to my apartment for months. Don't tell her how you said you were having second thoughts about the wedding. Don't tell her how you whispered that you loved me while enough." My brother, Tristan, shot to his feet, his face murderous. My sister, Sydney, grabbed his arm before he could charge the altar. Karen smirked at me, triumph gleaming in her dark eyes. "Face it, Anna. You're the consolation prize. He settled for you because I wouldn't commit. But now that we're having a baby," she placed a hand on her still flat stomach. "Well, priorities change." The church went dead silent. The only sound was my grandmother's rosary beads clicking as she prayed rapidly in Spanish. I looked at Colton. Sweat beaded on his forehead, his mouth opening and closing like a fish drowning in air. He couldn't even look me in the eye. That's when I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the kind of cold, predatory smile a shark gives right before it strikes. "Oh, Karen," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the silence. "You poor, delusional little girl." Her smirk faltered. I reached into my bouquet and pulled out my phone. With one swipe, I activated the Bluetooth speaker system we'd installed for the reception music. "Ladies and gentlemen, before we continue this fascinating display, I think you should all hear something." Karen's face cycled through triumphant, to confused, to absolutely terrified. Her own voice then boomed through the church speakers. "God, Colton is such an idiot. He has no idea I've been sleeping with his brother and his best man. The pregnancy could be any of theirs, but Colton makes the most money, so obviously he's my best bet for child support." The recording continued, Karen's laugh echoing off the church walls as she bragged about manipulating all 3 men, about how she planned to take Anna's pathetic little prince for everything he's worth. Karen dropped to her knees right there at the altar, her face as white as the communion wafer. "Anna, I can explain." "Oh, you'll have plenty of time to explain," I said calmly, my voice still amplified. "To the police, to the DNA lab, and to my lawyer." I looked out at the stunned congregation. 3 hours later, my so-called husband and maid of honor were begging me not to press charges. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Anna Rose Derrick, and up until that moment, I thought I was living my dream life. I'm a pediatric nurse, the kind of woman who believes in happily ever after because I spend my days helping kids believe in miracles. At 28, I had everything mapped out: marry Colton, buy a house, have 2 kids and a golden retriever. Colton Wellington was everything I thought I wanted, tall, handsome, successful, old money. We met at my cousin's wedding 3 years ago. He spilled red wine on my dress, then insisted on paying for the dry cleaning. One coffee date turned into dinner. Dinner turned into weekend trips. Weekend trips turned into moving in together. My family adored him. My mother said he was perfect. My dad took him fishing. My brother Tristan, who hated all my boyfriends, actually invited Colton to his poker games. My younger sister Sydney, my toughest critic, even admitted he had potential. But Karen Oscar, she loved him most of all. Karen and I had been inseparable since we were 5. We lived 3 houses apart, went to the same schools, shared the same dreams. When high school ended, I chose nursing, she chose marketing. We promised distance would never change us. She was my automatic first call for everything. When Colton proposed at the beach last Christmas, she was the second person I told. "I'm so happy for you," she'd squealed over FaceTime. "You deserve this, Anna. You deserve everything." She threw me the most elaborate engagement party, organized my bachelorette weekend, spent hours with me picking out dresses, arguing with florists, tasting cakes. "I can't wait to stand beside you on your big day," she'd said. "We've been sisters since kindergarten. Now it'll be official when I'm your matron of honor." I'd laughed. "Maid of honor, you're not married yet." She'd winked. "Maybe your wedding will inspire Angelo to finally propose." Angelo Kim was her sweet, quiet accountant boyfriend. Looking back, I should have noticed the signs. How Karen always found reasons to drop by our apartment when Colton was home, lingering after I left for early shifts, claiming she wanted to catch up with Colton about work stuff. How Colton started working late more often, especially on nights when Karen was too tired for our group dinners. My phone would buzz with texts from her at odd hours, "Just thinking about you at 2 a.m. Hope you're having a good day." Right in the middle of my shift, when she knew I couldn't respond. Colton became distant the last few months before the wedding. Shorter conversations, less eye contact. When I asked if he was getting cold feet, he'd pull me close and say, "Never. I can't wait to marry you, Anna." But there were other signs, too. Ones that my trusting heart chose to interpret as pre-wedding jitters. The way he'd get nervous when his phone buzzed during dinner, putting it face down. Stepping into another room to take calls, claiming it was work stuff, even on weekends. Mysterious charges on our joint credit card, small amounts, nothing suspicious individually. Coffee shops I'd never been to. A jewelry store purchase he claimed was a surprise for later. Gas stations on the other side of town when he said he'd been working downtown. 3 weeks before the wedding, I found a pregnancy test box in our bathroom trash, unused. When I asked Colton, he looked genuinely confused. Maybe Sydney left it when she visited. I called my sister. She laughed. "Girl, I'm not even dating anyone seriously." It made no sense, but I believed it because I desperately wanted to. The night before the wedding, at the rehearsal dinner, Karen seemed off. She kept checking her phone and barely touched her food. When my aunt asked if she was okay, she snapped, "I'm fine, just tired from all the wedding planning." Colton was weird, too. He kept staring at Karen when he thought no one was looking. When she got up to use the bathroom, he found an excuse to step outside for fresh air 2 minutes later. "You okay, bro?" Tristan asked Colton during the toasts. "You look like you're about to throw up." Colton laughed, but it sounded forced. Wedding nerves, you know how it is. But Tristan didn't know how it was. None of us had been married. That night, Colton and I followed tradition and stayed apart. I stayed at my parents' house with my bridesmaids. Karen was the last to leave. "Anna," she'd said at the door, her voice strange. "You know I love you, right?" "Of course, I do," I'd replied, hugging her back. "I love you, too." She hugged me tighter than usual. "Tomorrow is going to change everything." I'd laughed. That's kind of the point of weddings. But she wasn't smiling when she pulled away. I woke up at 6 a.m. on my wedding day with butterflies doing aerial acrobatics in my stomach, good butterflies, the kind that come with Christmas morning excitement. Karen breezed through the front door at 7 sharp, carrying fancy coffee drinks. Triple shot vanilla latte for the blushing bride, because we need you caffeinated and gorgeous. She looked perfect, hair already done, makeup flawless. "You're an angel," I'd said, accepting the coffee gratefully. "That's what maids of honor are for," she'd kissed my cheek, "to make sure you don't faint at the altar." The morning flew by in a blur of hair, makeup, and photos. My cousin Maria documented everything with her professional camera. Getting into my dress, my grandmother fastening the family pearl necklace, my father crying when he saw me. Karen fluffed my train, fixed my veil, touched up my lipstick. The perfect maid of honor, my best friend since forever. But looking back, she was also checking her phone constantly. Quick glances when she thought no one was looking, her fingers flying over the screen when she stepped into the bathroom or went to grab something from her car. At one point, Sydney caught her. "Girl, who are you texting so much?" "Angelo's at the golf course." It's bad luck for the bridal party to talk to the groomsmen. Karen's cheeks flushed pink. "Just work stuff. You know how it is with clients." "On a Saturday?" Sydney raised an eyebrow. My sister had built-in bullshit detectors. "Financial markets never sleep," Karen said smoothly. Too smoothly. We arrived at the church for photos. "Can you check if they need anything downstairs?" I asked Karen during a break. "Make sure Colton remembered his allergy medication." She nodded. "Of course, back in 5 minutes." She was gone for 20. When she came back, her lipstick was slightly smudged, and her hair looked less perfectly arranged. "Everything okay down there?" I asked. "Perfect," she said, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. "Colton says he can't wait to see you." By 3:45 p.m., guests were filing in. I peeked through the bridal suite window and saw everyone who mattered in my life gathered. Colton's family took up the right side of the church, my family the left. At 3:55 p.m., the wedding coordinator knocked. "Ladies, it's showtime." My bridesmaids lined up, Karen at the front. Dad offered me his arm. "Ready, mija?" I took a deep breath. "Ready." The doors opened. The string quartet began the wedding march. Every face turned towards me, smiling. This was it. The moment I'd dreamed about. I walked down the aisle, feeling like I was floating. The church was perfect. The music was perfect. Colton looked perfect. Everything was perfect, until it wasn't. "I'm pregnant, Anna, and Colton is the father." The words hung in the air like poison gas. I felt the entire congregation inhale collectively, then hold their breath, waiting. My bouquet suddenly felt heavy. The church, which had been warm and golden, now felt cold and stark. Every eye was on me, watching for my reaction, waiting for me to crumble. But I didn't crumble. Instead, something ice-cold settled in my chest. Clarity, sharp as a blade. Colton finally found his voice. "Karen, please, don't do this. Not here. Not now." "When else, Colton?" She stepped closer to him, her voice growing stronger. "When you're on your honeymoon. When Anna's already legally tied to you. When it's too late for her to make an informed choice." She turned to face our guests, playing to the audience. "I'm sorry, everyone. I know this is awkward, but Anna deserves to know the truth before she makes the biggest mistake of her life." My father's face had gone from confused to murderous. He started to rise, but my mother grabbed his wrist. "Esteban, no," she hissed. "Let Anna handle this." Karen looked back at me, and for a split second, I saw something that looked almost like regret. Then her chin lifted, and the mask of righteous indignation slid back into place. "I didn't plan for this to happen," she continued, her voice carrying. "Colton and I, we fought it for months. We both love you, Anna, but sometimes love isn't enough to stop other kinds of love." The guests started murmuring. "Oh my God, that poor girl, at her own wedding." Colton looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Sweat broke out on his forehead, his hands shaking. "Anna, I can explain." "Explain what?" Karen interrupted. "Explain how you told me you were having second thoughts. How you said you felt trapped. How you whispered my name when enough." Tristan shot to his feet, his face twisted with rage. Sydney and my cousin Roberto grabbed his arms, holding him back. "Let me go." Tristan snarled. "I'm going to deal with him. I'm going to kill both of them." The security guards my dad had hired moved forward, ready to intervene. Karen seemed to feed off the chaos. Her eyes were bright, almost fevered. "Anna, you have to understand. I never meant for this, but we can't help who we fall in love with. And Colton, he loves me. He's always loved me." She placed both hands on her stomach, a protective, maternal gesture. "This baby deserves to have its father, and Colton deserves to be with the woman he truly wants." Colton looked at her like she'd lost her mind. "Karen, stop talking. You're making this worse." "Worse?" she scoffed. Colton hiding the truth is what made this worse. Living a lie is what made this worse. She gestured toward me. Look at her, standing there in that ridiculous dress, thinking she's about to marry the love of her life. Don't you think she deserves better than a man who wishes he was marrying someone else? That's when something snapped inside my chest. Not broke, snapped like a rubber band stretched too tight. I smiled. It must have been quite a smile because Karen actually took a step backward. Oh, honey, I said, my voice soft and sweet as honey, you sweet, stupid little girl. Her confident expression wavered. I reached into my bouquet and pulled out my phone. With one smooth motion, I activated the Bluetooth connection to the church's sound system. Before we continue with this fascinating performance, I announced, my voice now carrying clearly through the speakers, I think everyone should hear something. Karen's face went white. Anna, what are you? I pressed play. Karen's own voice filled the church, crystal clear. God, Colton is such an idiot. He has no idea I've been sleeping with his brother and his best man. The pregnancy could be any of theirs. But Colton makes the most money, so obviously he's my best bet for child support. The congregation gasped in unison, but the recording wasn't finished. Anna's so pathetically naive, it's almost sad. She actually thinks Colton loves her. Meanwhile, he can't keep his hands off me every time she works late shifts. Last week, he said he wishes he'd proposed to me instead. Colton's face had gone from pale to green. He looked like he might actually vomit. But Karen's voice continued, bright with laughter. The best part is she's paying for half the wedding, so technically she's funding her own humiliation. God, I can't wait to see her face when I tell everyone. It's going to be so delicious. The church was dead silent except for my grandmother's rosary beads clicking faster and faster. The recording kept playing. Karen bragging about manipulating all three men, laughing about how she planned to take Anna's pathetic little prince for everything he's worth. Karen discussing her backup plan, if Colton doesn't leave me, I'll just claim he raped me. Who's going to believe his word over mine? By the time I finally stopped the recording, Karen had collapsed onto her knees at the altar, her face buried in her hands, the dusty rose dress pulled around her like spilled wine. Anna, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Please, I can explain. I was drunk when I said those things. You didn't mean to get caught, I corrected, my voice still amplified. There's a difference. I turned to Colton, who looked like a deer caught in headlights. Anything you'd like to add, honey? Or should I play the recording of you calling me a boring, clingy bitch while you were screwing my best friend in the apartment I pay half the rent for? He opened his mouth, then closed it. Opened it again. No words came out. I looked out at the congregation. 200 faces stared back at me, expressions ranging from shock to appalled to impressed to murderous. Those were mostly my relatives. Ladies and gentlemen, I said calmly, I apologize for the interruption, but as you can see, we have a slight issue with the groom and my maid of honor. Something about honesty, fidelity, and basic human decency. My father finally broke free from my mother's grip and stood up. Anna, mija, do you want me to? No, Papa. I've got this. And I did. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt completely in control. You want to know the funny thing? I said, my voice still carrying through the church speakers as I looked down at Karen, still on her knees. I've known about you two for months. The congregation rustled. Karen's head snapped up, her face streaked with mascara. That's impossible, she whispered. Is it? I pulled out my phone again, scrolling. Shall we start with the pictures my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, took of you leaving our apartment building at 6 a.m. on February 14th? You know, Valentine's Day, when I was working a double shift at the hospital. I held up the phone so everyone could see the clear photo of Karen doing the walk of shame in yesterday's clothes. Or maybe we should discuss the credit card charges, Colton. I turned to my groom, who looked like he wanted to evaporate. The ones you thought I wouldn't notice because they were small amounts. The coffee shop where you meet Karen every Tuesday. The jewelry store where you bought her that little diamond necklace she's wearing right now. Karen's hand flew to her throat, where a delicate chain with a tiny diamond pendant caught the church light, the same pendant I'd seen on our statement and assumed was a surprise for me. The hotel room you booked last month when you told me you were at that financial conference in Chicago, I continued. Except the conference was virtual, wasn't it, Colton? And you were actually 20 minutes away at the Marriott downtown with my maid of honor. Colton finally found his voice. Anna, I can explain. Explain what? How you took $5,000 from our joint wedding account to pay for her credit card bills. How you used my engagement ring money for my grandmother to cover her rent when she got fired from her marketing job. How you promised her you'd call off our wedding after the honeymoon so she could save face. The church erupted in gasps and angry murmurs. Someone behind me said, "Jesus Christ," loudly enough to make Father Rodriguez wince. But I wasn't done. Or maybe, I said, my voice getting dangerously soft, we should discuss the real reason Karen is here making this dramatic announcement. Karen struggled to her feet, her hands shaking. "Anna, please, see, here's the thing about my best friend since kindergarten," I told the congregation like I was giving a toast. "She's always been competitive. Always wanted what I had. My dolls, my clothes, my boyfriends. But this time, she bit off more than she could chew." I walked closer to Karen, my wedding dress rustling. The guests were so quiet I could hear the silk train sliding across the marble floor. "Tell them about the DNA test, Karen." Her face went ashen. "I don't know what you're talking about." "The DNA test you took last week," I pressed. "The one that proved the baby isn't Colton's." The church exploded. Gasps, exclamations, the sound of shocked whispers turning into full conversations. Someone's grandmother started praying loudly in Spanish. Colton stared at Karen like he'd never seen her before. "What is she talking about?" Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. That's not. Anna, you're lying." "Am I?" I pulled out a folded paper from inside my bouquet. Paternity test results dated last Tuesday. 24% probability that Colton Wellington is the father, which for those of you who aren't familiar with genetics, means definitely not the father. I held the paper high enough for everyone to see the official letterhead. "But here's my favorite part," I continued, my voice taking on a sweet, conversational tone. "The test also shows a 99% probability that the father is," I paused for dramatic effect, "James Wellington." Colton's face went from green to white to red in 3 seconds. "My brother." "Your brother," I confirmed cheerfully. "Who, by the way, is standing right behind you in your groomsman line, looking like he wants to crawl under a rock." Every head turned towards the groomsman. James Wellington, 2 years younger than Colton and infinitely more charming, had gone pale as communion bread. He started backing away from the altar. "Jamie?" Colton turned to stare at his brother. "You slept with Karen." James cleared his throat. "It's not. We didn't. It was just a few times." "A few times?" Karen finally found her voice, shrill with panic. "James, you told me you loved me. You said you were going to leave Rachel." Now the congregation was getting a show better than daytime television. Rachel Thompson, James's fiancée, sitting in the 3rd row, shot to her feet. "What did you just say?" Rachel's voice could have shattered the stained glass windows. "Rachel, baby, I can explain," James started. But I wasn't finished. "Oh, but wait," I said brightly. "There's more. Tell them about Michael, Karen." Michael Foster, Colton's best man, standing at the far end of the groomsman line, went rigid. "No," Karen whispered. "Anna, please, don't." "Michael Foster," I announced to the church. "Also a possible father. Also promised he'd leave his wife for you. Also completely unaware that you were playing musical beds with the entire wedding party." Michael's wife, seated with the other spouses, let out a sound like a wounded animal. She turned to stare at her husband with murder in her eyes. The church was in complete chaos now. Rachel was screaming at James. Michael's wife was crying while her sister held her back from charging the altar. My relatives were shouting threats in Spanish and English. Colton's family looked like they wanted to disown everyone and flee to another country. But through it all, I stood calm and collected in my princess ball gown, watching. My carefully laid trap springing shut on every single person who had betrayed me. "How?" Karen whispered, tears streaming down her face. "How did you find out?" I smiled. The same shark smile from earlier, but bigger now. More satisfied. "Because, my dear former best friend," I said sweetly, "you forgot one very important thing about me." "What?" "I'm a nurse," I said. "I know how to collect evidence without people noticing. Hair from your brush when I was over for planning sessions. Saliva from glasses at restaurants. Coffee cups from the trash." I shrugged elegantly. It's amazing what people will throw away when they think no one's paying attention. Colton stared at me like I was a stranger. "You planned this? The whole wedding?" "Oh, honey." I laughed, and it wasn't a nice sound. The wedding was real. My feelings were real. My trust was real. But your betrayal. That was also real. So, I decided to give you exactly what you deserved. I gestured to the chaos around us. A public humiliation that matches your private betrayal. Karen was crying so hard she could barely speak. Anna, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. I was jealous and stupid and greedy. Don't forget greedy, I finished. You saw a meal ticket and decided to take it regardless of who got hurt. I turned back to the congregation, many of whom were now standing and talking loudly. Ladies and gentlemen, I called out, my voice cutting through the noise. I apologize for turning my wedding into an episode of Jerry Springer, but I figured if I was going to be humiliated, I might as well make sure I wasn't the only one. My father pushed through the crowd to reach me. Mija, what do you need? What can we do? Actually, Papa, I said, pulling off my engagement ring and wedding band. I need you to call Detective Rivera. Detective Rivera. Colton looked confused. Why are you calling the police? Because, I said calmly, handing my rings to my father, embezzlement is a crime. So is fraud. So is identity theft. And Karen has committed all three. The blood drained from Karen's face. What are you talking about? The credit cards you opened in my name, I explained patiently. The loans you took out using my social security number. The $50,000 you stole from my inheritance account to pay for your shopping sprees and abortion fees. Abortion fees? Colton looked like he'd been slapped. Oh, yes. I nodded. This isn't Karen's first pregnancy scare. Just her first attempt to use one as a weapon. She's had 3 abortions in the past 2 years. All paid for with money stolen from me. Karen collapsed back to her knees, sobbing. Hysterically. Anna, please. I'll pay it back. I'll do anything. Please don't call the police. Too late, I said, checking my phone. I already called them. They should be here any minute. And as if on cue, the sound of sirens began to wail in the distance, growing closer by the second. The police sirens were getting louder, but the chaos in the church was deafening. Rachel was still screaming at James. Michael's wife had broken free and was now advancing on Michael with her purse raised like a weapon. My family members were shouting in a mixture of Spanish and English, while Colton's family looked like they were attending a funeral. Anna, you can't be serious about this, Colton said, reaching for my hands. I stepped back before he could touch me. Dead serious, I replied. You stole from me, Colton. You used our joint account like your personal piggy bank. You forged my signature on loan documents, and you helped her. I pointed at Karen, still kneeling, commit identity theft. I never, the apartment lease you co-signed for her using my credit information, I continued. The car loan you guaranteed with my income statements, the credit cards you helped her apply for by providing my employment verification. Should I go on? Colton's face crumbled. He looked around desperately as if the church's stained glass saints might offer him sanctuary. They didn't. The sirens stopped right outside the church. Heavy footsteps echoed in the vestibule, and Detective Rivera appeared in the doorway with 2 uniformed officers. Anna, Detective Rivera called out, surveying the chaos. I got your message. Are these the suspects? I nodded towards Karen and Colton. Karen Oscar and Colton Wellington. All the evidence is in the folder I sent to your office yesterday. Karen looked up at me, mascara streaming. Yesterday? You sent evidence yesterday. I sent it last week, actually, I corrected. But I asked Detective Rivera to wait until today to make the arrests. I wanted to give you one last chance to come clean, to maybe, just maybe, show a shred of decency and call off this ridiculous charade before you destroyed everything. But you planned the DNA tests, Colton said weakly. You knew. I hoped I was wrong, I said simply. Right up until this morning, I hoped I'd wake up and discover this was all some horrible nightmare, that my best friend since kindergarten and the man I loved wouldn't actually betray me this completely. Detective Rivera approached the altar. Karen Oscar, you're under arrest for identity theft, fraud, and embezzlement. He turned to Colton. Colton Wellington, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud and embezzlement. No, wait. Karen scrambled to her feet as the officer pulled out handcuffs. Anna, please, we can work this out. I'll pay you back every penny. With what money? I asked coldly. You don't have a job. You have $50,000 in debt. You're pregnant with a baby that isn't even Colton's. What exactly are you going to pay me back with? I'll figure something out. Please, Anna. We've been friends since we were 5 years old. That has to count for something. It did count for something, I said, my voice breaking just a little. It counted for everything. That's why this hurts so much. The officer cuffed Karen while she sobbed. Colton didn't resist, but he kept staring at me like he couldn't believe what was happening. Anna, he said as they started to lead him away. This whole thing with Karen, it was a mistake. A stupid, terrible mistake. I looked at him for a long moment, this man I'd planned to spend my life with, trusted with my heart, my body, my future, my money. No, Colton, I said quietly. Marrying you would have been the mistake. As the police led them toward the church doors, Karen turned back one last time. Anna, she called desperately. The baby? What about the baby? That's between you and James, I replied. Or you and Michael, or you and whoever else you've been sleeping with. But it's not my problem anymore. The church doors closed behind them with a heavy thud. For a moment, there was absolute silence. 200 people stared at me in my wedding dress, standing alone at the altar where I should have been saying, I do, to the love of my life. Then my grandmother started clapping. Slow, deliberate applause that echoed through the church like thunder. One by one, other people joined in. My parents, my siblings, my cousins, my college friends, even some of Colton's relatives who looked mortified. Soon the entire congregation was on their feet applauding. Mija, my father said, climbing the steps to the altar and pulling me into his arms. I am so proud of you. Are you? I asked, my voice muffled against his shoulder. I just turned my wedding into a crime scene. You turned your wedding into justice, my mother corrected, joining our embrace. Those people, what they did to you, it's unforgivable. Tristan pushed through the crowd, his face still flushed with anger. Anna, I'm sorry I didn't see it. I should have known. You couldn't have known, I told him. I barely knew myself until a few months ago. Sydney appeared next to us, her expression a mixture of pride and fury. Girl, that was the most badass thing I've ever seen. But I'm still going to murder both of them when they get out of jail. No murdering, I said weakly. I've caused enough drama for one day. But even as I said it, I felt lighter than I had in months. The weight of pretending everything was fine, of lying to myself about red flags, of carrying the burden of their betrayal alone. It was all gone. Father Rodriguez approached cautiously. Anna, my dear, are you all right? Do you need any, actually, Father, I said, surprising myself. Would it be possible to say a prayer? Not a wedding prayer, obviously, but maybe a prayer of gratitude. He smiled. Of course, Mija. The congregation settled into their seats as Father Rodriguez moved to the pulpit. But instead of a somber prayer, he spoke about strength, about truth, about the courage it takes to stand up for yourself when the people you trust most have betrayed you. Sometimes, he said, God shows us people's true faces, not to hurt us, but to save us from a lifetime of being hurt by them. As he spoke, I felt my phone buzz with a text message, then another, then several more. I glanced down and saw messages from numbers I didn't recognize. OMG. We just saw the live stream. You are a queen. Holy shit. Is this real? This is the best wedding video ever. Wait, someone was live streaming this. I looked around and realized that several people had their phones out, not just taking pictures, but actively recording. Some were even holding their phones up like they were broadcasting live. Oh no, I whispered to Sydney. Please tell me this isn't going viral. She checked her phone and winced. Anna, you might want to sit down. How bad? #wedding revenge is already trending on Twitter. Someone posted the whole thing on TikTok and it has 2 million views. Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat. Babe, you're everywhere. I stared at her. Everywhere. The good news is everyone thinks you're a hero. The comments are all about how brave you are and how those two got exactly what they deserved. I looked around the church at all the faces, family, friends, strangers, who had come to witness what they thought would be a joyful celebration. Instead, they'd gotten front row seats to the most dramatic revenge plot in wedding history. And honestly, I wasn't sorry. You know what? I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. I hope it does go viral. I hope every cheating bastard and backstabbing friend in the world sees this and thinks twice before they betray someone who loves them. The congregation erupted in cheers and applause again. But I wasn't finished. The wedding reception venue looked like a ghost town. White tablecloths still covered the tables. Centerpieces of white roses still perfumed the air. The DJ still had his equipment set up. But instead of celebrating my marriage, we were having what my cousin Maria dubbed the world's most expensive divorce party. Waste not, want not. My mother had declared. We paid for this food. We paid for this music. And we're going to celebrate Anna's freedom. So that's what we did. The guests who stayed, and surprisingly, most of them did, danced to the playlist Colton and I had chosen for our first dance. They ate the dinner we'd agonized over, toasted with the champagne we'd saved up to buy, and took pictures in front of the flower wall that was supposed to backdrop our wedding photos. It was surreal and perfect and absolutely nothing like I'd imagined my wedding day would be, but it was also exactly what I needed. I was sitting at the head table, still in my wedding dress, but with my shoes kicked off, when my phone rang. Detective Rivera. Anna, I wanted to update you on the arrests. That was fast, I said, stepping away from the noise. Well, when suspects confess to everything the moment they're alone in interrogation rooms, it speeds things up considerably. They confessed. Oh, yes. Colton broke down the moment we separated them. Told us everything. The affair, the money, the fake documents, even some things you didn't know about. Apparently, Karen convinced him to take out a loan against your house to pay for her medical bills. My stomach dropped. Our house. The one we just bought together. The one you just bought together, he corrected. According to the bank records, you're the only one on the mortgage. But Colton forged your signature on a second mortgage application last month. $50,000. I sank into a nearby chair. 50,000 more. The good news is we caught it before the money was dispersed. The bank flagged the signature as suspicious and held the funds pending investigation, so that money is safe. What about Karen? Miss Oscars, she's a mess. Crying, apologizing, claiming she was manipulated by Colton. But then she started trying to negotiate a deal, which pretty much eliminated any sympathy we might have had. What kind of deal? She offered to testify against Colton for a reduced sentence. Said she could provide evidence of other crimes he committed. When we told her we already had all the evidence we needed, she tried to claim he forced her to steal from you. I almost laughed. Even handcuffed in a police station, Karen was still trying to manipulate everyone. How long will they be in jail? That depends on the DA and how much they cooperate. But Anna, with the evidence you provided, we're looking at multiple felony charges. They're going to prison, not jail. Probably for several years. Several years. I tried to process that. By the time they got out, I'd be in my 30s, maybe married to someone else, maybe with kids, maybe living a completely different life. The thought didn't make me sad. It made me hopeful. Detective Rivera, can I ask you something? Of course. How did you know? When I first came to you 3 months ago with my suspicions, you didn't seem surprised. He sighed. Unfortunately, Anna, I see this more often than you'd think. Financial betrayal between romantic partners, friends taking advantage of friends, elaborate deception schemes. What I don't often see is someone as prepared as you were. Prepared? The evidence you collected was better than what most of our detectives gather. Every document labeled and dated, every conversation recorded, every financial transaction tracked. You built an airtight case. I'm a nurse, I said simply. We're trained to be thorough. You're also incredibly brave. A lot of people in your situation would have confronted the cheaters privately. Maybe tried to work things out. You chose justice instead. Justice? Was that what this felt more like? Survival. After I hung up, I walked back toward the celebration. But before I could reach my table, I was intercepted by a woman I didn't recognize. Mid-30s, professional looking with a press badge. Anna Derrick, I'm Jennifer from Channel 7 News. I was wondering if I could ask you a few questions about what happened today. The news. I looked around and realized there were several people with cameras and notepads. How did you? The video went viral about 2 hours ago. We've been trying to reach you for comment. What video? She held up her phone, showing me a TikTok with over 5 million views. It was the moment I played Karen's recorded confession. Someone had filmed the entire thing and posted it with the caption, "Bride exposes cheating fiancé and maid of honor at altar." Watch to the end. The comments were endless. This woman is an icon. The way she stayed calm. Queen behavior. I wish I had her spine when my ex cheated. Plot twist. This is the best wedding ever. Can we make this woman president? So, Jennifer continued, would you be willing to give us an exclusive interview? Our viewers are very interested in your story. I looked at her, then at the cameras, then at my family celebrating my freedom instead of mourning my humiliation. You know what? I said, smiling. Yes. But not here. This is my family's time. Tomorrow, I'll tell you everything. Everything. The whole story. How I found out, how I planned the trap, how I gathered the evidence, all of it. Her eyes lit up. That would be incredible. This story has all the elements: betrayal, revenge, justice, courage. People are calling you a hero. A hero? 3 hours ago, I'd been a heartbroken bride. Now, I was a hero. Life was weird. As the evening wound down and guests started saying their goodbyes, I found myself alone for the first time all day. I'd changed out of my wedding dress into a simple black cocktail dress. The reception venue was mostly empty except for family helping clean up. I walked out to the venue's garden where fairy lights twinkled in the trees like stars. This was where Colton and I were supposed to have our first dance. Instead, I'd spent the evening dancing with my father, my brother, my grandfather, and anyone else who asked. That had been perfect. Different from what I'd planned, but perfect in its own way. There you are. I turned to see Sydney walking toward me with 2 glasses of champagne. Thought you might need this, she said, handing me a glass. Thanks. I took a sip. Can I ask you something? Sydney asked. Anything. When did you know about Colton and Karen? I was quiet for a moment. Honestly, I had suspicions for about 6 months. Brutal things. The way they looked at each other when they thought no one was watching. How Karen always found excuses to be around him. How Colton seemed distant with you. Why didn't you say anything? Because I wasn't sure. She nodded. I understand. Do you think I did the right thing? I asked. The whole public humiliation thing, the arrests. Sydney stared at me like I'd grown a second head. Anna, they stole from you. They lied to you. They betrayed you in the worst possible way. And they were planning to let you marry him and spend your honeymoon not knowing that your husband was in love with your best friend and carrying her baby. James's baby, I corrected. Whatever. The point is they deserved everything they got. And honestly, you probably saved other people from being victimized by them in the future. You think so? I know. Karen's been using people her whole life. Remember in high school when she borrowed money from half our class and never paid anyone back? Or when she cheated on that scholarship exam and let Maria get blamed for it? Or when she... Okay, I laughed. I get it. I should have seen the patterns earlier. Love makes us blind to patterns, Sydney said gently. Both kinds of love. Romantic love and friend love. We stood in comfortable silence, sipping our champagne and watching the fairy lights twinkle. So, what happens now? Sydney asked. Well, according to Detective Rivera, they'll both probably go to prison. I'll have to testify at the trial, but he says it's pretty much a slam-dunk case. I meant what happens to you. What do you do now? I thought about it. For 3 years, my entire future had been planned around Colton. Our apartment, our joint accounts, our 5-year plan, our dreams of kids and a house and growing old together. All of that was gone now. I guess I figure out who I am when I'm not half of a couple, I said. I haven't been single since I was 25. I don't even remember what I like to do in my spare time. You like to read trashy romance novels and eat ice cream straight from the container while watching cooking shows, Sydney said immediately. Those are things I did when Colton was working late. Exactly. Things you like that you never got to do because you were too busy being the perfect girlfriend. She had a point. I want to travel, I said suddenly. I've always wanted to see Europe, but Colton said it was too expensive. I've got money saved up now that I'm not spending it on a wedding or a cheating boyfriend. Maybe I'll take that trip. Do it. And I want to go back to school, get my master's degree in pediatric nursing, maybe specialize in trauma care. You'd be amazing at that. And I want to learn how to salsa dance. Real salsa. Not the basic steps Colton and I learned for our wedding dance. Sydney grinned. Now you're talking. What else? I want to adopt a dog. A big one. Colton was allergic so we could never have pets. Keep going. I want to be someone I'm proud of. Not someone who ignores red flags because she's afraid of being alone. Not someone who lets people walk all over her because she's nice. Anna, look at me. I turned to face my sister. You are someone to be proud of. What you did today. That wasn't the action of someone who lets people walk all over her. That was the action of a woman who knows her worth and refuses to accept anything less. It was pretty badass, wasn't it? It was legendary. They're going to tell stories about today for years. As if to prove her point, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. Saw your video online. You're my hero. My husband cheated on me last year and I wish I'd had your courage. Thank you for showing me what strength looks like. I showed the text to Sydney. See, she said. You're inspiring people. My phone buzzed again, then again. Message after message from strangers who'd seen the video and wanted to share their own stories, or to tell me how my courage had inspired them. This is insane, I said, scrolling through dozens of messages. I just wanted justice for myself. I never expected to become a symbol of female empowerment. I was going to say to become an internet meme, but sure, let's go with female empowerment, Sydney laughed. Both can be true. We finished our champagne as the cleanup crew finished packing up. Soon the venue would be ready for the next event, the next celebration, the next beginning. Ready to go home? Sydney asked. I looked around one more time. This place that was supposed to hold the memories of the happiest day of my life. Instead, it would always be the place where I chose myself over settling for less than I deserved. Actually, I said, I don't want to go home. Not to the apartment I shared with Colton anyway. Can I stay with you tonight? Of course. We'll order pizza, drink wine, and plan your European vacation. Sounds perfect. As we walked to the parking lot, Sydney's phone rang. She answered it, then held the phone out to me with a strange expression. It's for you. Who is it? Ellen's show. I stared at the phone. Ellen as in Ellen DeGeneres. Sydney nodded. I took the phone with shaking hands. Hello. Anna, this is Sarah from Ellen's production team. We'd love to have you on the show next week to talk about what happened today. Ellen thinks your story is incredible and wants to celebrate your courage. Ellen DeGeneres wanted to celebrate my courage. I looked at Sydney, who was grinning like a maniac. You know what? I said into the phone. I'd love to. After I hung up, Sydney grabbed my hands. Anna Derrick, you are about to be the most famous revenge bride in history. Is that a good thing? Are you kidding? You're about to become every woman's hero. You're going to inspire millions of people to stand up for themselves. You're going to change your life completely. Exactly. Are you ready for that? I thought about Colton and Karen probably sitting in jail cells right now, realizing that their betrayal had consequences they never imagined. I thought about all the messages from strangers who said my story had inspired them. I thought about the life I'd been planning with someone who didn't deserve me and the life I was about to build for myself. You know what, Sydney? I said. I've never been more ready for anything in my life. And as we walked to the car, I couldn't help but smile. This morning, I'd woken up expecting to become Mrs. Colton Wellington. Instead, I was ending the day as Anna Derrick, the woman who refused to be played, who chose justice over comfort, who turned her worst day into her most powerful moment. They thought they ruined me on my wedding day. Instead, I buried them with the truth. I'm writing this from a cafe in Barcelona, sipping sangria and watching the sunset paint the Mediterranean golden. The European trip I dreamed about. I took it. 8 months backpacking through Spain, Italy, and France, staying in hostels, making friends with strangers, eating gelato for breakfast, and learning that I'm braver than I ever knew. Colton and Karen were both sentenced to 4 years in prison. They'll be eligible for parole in 18 months. I won't be attending their parole hearings. The baby was born 7 months after the wedding that didn't happen. James stepped up and is actually being a decent father, according to Rachel, who somehow forgave him and is helping raise the child. People are complicated. Michael's wife divorced him and took half of everything he owned. He sent me a thank you card. I sold the apartment Colton and I shared and bought a little house with a garden where my new dog, Luna, likes to chase butterflies. I did go back to school. I start my master's program in pediatric trauma nursing next month. And yes, I learned to salsa dance. I'm terrible at it, but I love it anyway. Sometimes people recognize me on the street and ask if I regret what I did. If I wish I'd handled things differently. If I ever think about forgiving them. The answer is always no. I don't regret choosing truth over comfort. I don't regret demanding justice instead of accepting betrayal. And I certainly don't regret discovering my own strength in the process. The woman who walked down that aisle 8 months ago was hoping to find happiness by attaching herself to someone else's life. The woman writing this has learned that the best kind of happiness comes from building a life you're proud of, with or without someone else. I'm not looking for my next relationship. I'm not trying to replace what I lost. I'm creating something entirely new. And if someone wants to be part of that life, they'll have to earn it. They'll have to prove they deserve the love of a woman who knows her worth, who won't ignore red flags, who won't settle for less than she deserves. Because I learned something important on my wedding day. The person who matters most in your love story is you. My story? It's just getting started.